Welcome to HabsCast. I am your host for this podcast. My name is Eric Macramalla. Work over there at TSN and Forbes, and also an overly paid lawyer, but that's totally fine by me. And I'm on Grant McCagg's podcast called HabsCast. So it's his. I'm hosting this one, but this is his brainchild. As you know, I think it's podcast number 5 or number 6. Grant is the guy when it comes to, hey, I want to be a smarter fan, which is why I followed you from the beginning, Grant. I love your stuff. It's just different. And I think that we'll start with this. I feel like now as sports fans, because there's so much information and data available, that it's no longer enough to get superficial views on players, teams, line combinations. I think fans want more because fans want to understand, right? And I think that's in part why you've become so popular, is that, okay, you offer a deep dive. We may not always agree with what you have to say, but if we all agree, to be a really boring world. But I feel as though you provide something that the modern day sports fan or the sports fan that has evolved is looking for. Curious as to your views on that.
Oh, perfect timing. Somebody just rang the doorbell and my puppy upstairs is barking. So, hey,
That just makes you human. People love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What's your dog's name?
Chester.
Chester. Okay.
Yeah, we
I
got him
thought it'd
from
be
near
Guy, but it's
Winchester.
okay. I thought it'd be Guy or Jean or Rocket, but it's fine.
Yeah, two of us kind of had to agree on it. You know what I mean? She's
Yeah.
a Ottawa Senators fan, so yeah, that wasn't gonna fly. Um, hey, Macramalla, how are you doing?
Yeah. So then just tell me a bit about, like when you started going on social media, did you say to yourself, you know what? I think there's a need here, and I think I'm going to fill it, a need for a bit of a deeper dive.
Well, I went on social media because I was a sports junkie more than anything, and it was great to get feedback from other people. But yeah, I did think that I maybe offered a little different perspective. I was lucky enough to be mentored by some great people in the scouting industry. And also GM industry, with being from a small town where Brian Murray is from, and Tim Murray and Todd Hardy, who were scouts in the NHL, and we'd meet for a few pops every now and then at the local tavern, and I soaked everything in and got to know. I was like always asking them questions and getting mentored and learning what NHL scouts look for in NHL players, and learned a lot from them. Was lucky enough to get into the scouting business with McKean's and scout for a couple of years with the Montreal Canadiens. Learned a lot. Trevor Timmins was a great mentor for me as well, and yeah, I started adding my insight to social media platforms, and taken a lot of heat through the years because I didn't always go with the flow. But you have to opine what you feel, and I wasn't going to just go along with the consensus all the time, and made for a lot of fun and a lot of discussion through the years.
Well, I think if everybody agrees with everything you have to say all the time, you're probably doing something wrong. That's what I've always said. Okay, so let's get to, well, later in the show we'll talk about the Habs this upcoming season. I'm hearing maybe they might need a second line centerman. I'm not entirely sure. We can talk about that, but let's start something you want to talk about, which I love, because it's a stroll down memory lane, and that is the worst contracts in Montreal Canadiens history, the top five worst contracts in Canadiens history. So let's start with you. All right, you give me your fifth worst contract in Montreal Canadiens history. You don't go as far back as Howie Morenz and Aurel Joliet, because I'm not familiar with them and how much they made. So maybe something the time where we had color on TV. But I'm just curious, who's number 5 on your list?
Okay, well, 5 was kind of an outlier, and I thought we might be going in reverse, but that's fine. We'll start with
Reverse,
the
but that's boring. You have to build. It has to crest at the end.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of people probably have the same guy number one, but we'll
Yes,
see. We'll see what
probably.
that. Um, Number 5 for me, Bunny Larocque. Now, people are going to wonder why. um, well, I'll show you why. I came across this. I remember when I first saw this. This was Montreal Canadiens salaries in 1977-78. And Bunny, if you scroll down and you look at some of these legends, Hall of Famers, uh, Bunny Larocque was making $105,000. Larry Robinson was making 125, and Steve Shutt was making 120. So combined, they were making $35,000 more a year than Montreal's backup goalie, who played maybe 1/3 of the games. Victor Tikhonov considered Bunny Larocque. He called him the best player on the planet in 1977. Or sorry, not Bunny Larocque, Bob Gainey. And Bob Gainey was making 22% less than Bunny Larocque, the backup goalie, in 1977-78. So just from a perspective of when you compare, players, the eighth best salary on perhaps the best NHL team in NHL in history was a backup goalie, which to me was it was way out of whack. I don't know why he got it. I think in part, and I was going to mention a couple of guys too. The worst non-contracts that were never signed. When Ken Dryden's topical right now. When Sam Pollock lowballed him in 70 after the 72-73 win, with they'd only lost 10 games. It was the best record or second best in NHL history. Won the cup, and he lowballed Ken Dryden and wouldn't pay him what he was worth. Kenny sat out for a year, and he never was quite the same player after. Liam McGuire and I had a conversation about this a couple days ago because it's topical talking about Kenny right now, but he's right that after he sat out a year, he was never quite the same goalie, and the Canadiens won anyway because they were just so good. But that hurt the Canadiens when Dryden sat out a year. They didn't win the cup for 2 straight years, which in that era was just unprecedented. And I think, because of that, Pollock probably turned on as well. I better pay my other goalie. Make sure that he doesn't hold out for a year just in case Kenny was always that kind of you never thought if he was going to retire or not. And he finally did at the age of 31. So
he always seemed like he was someone who didn't define himself exclusively as a hockey player, more as a person who played hockey.
Absolutely. You knew that he had other options. Well, you being a lawyer, that, the history on that. He quit for a year, held out for a year, and worked on becoming studied. And so it was different in that regard. But yeah, Bunny Larocque's my number 5. I thought I'd throw a curveball in there.
Well, okay. So, you and I are different ages, so we're going to have a different experience as far as the worst contracts. So some of the players you put up there, I caught them in the latter part of their career. And when I was a kid, like, I didn't operate as a shareholder of a team. You know how fans now were shareholders. You're paying this guy this much. This is the term. What are you doing? You need to listen to us. So back then, guys like Bob Gainey and Larry Robinson, they were just heroes, right? That's just, it was different. So I wasn't as critical. So I did go back and look at the worst contracts, or the ones who came to mind. I wrote them down quickly. And number 5 on my list, I suspect, Grant, you're not going to like it, but I hope you don't like it, because I haven't seen you angry yet. We met for a beer. You were so nice in person. I'm like, I want to make Grant angry. So perhaps this is going to work. His contract, 7 years, $38.5 million, Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson had a really good season last season. He had to redefine how he played the game, right? But before that, he was a one-trick pony. He was a north-south player. he might have, I never did the math, but I suspect he had the highest number of line mates over the past couple of years, because he's hard to play with, because he operates on an island. It's a north-south game. It became predictable, and it wasn't effective. And he did redefine his style of play last season and was killing penalties, and I thought he was really effective. And we all know that. But the bottom line is this, is you can't pay a fourth liner $5.5 million and do that over 7 years. And we didn't know he was a fourth liner then. When we acquired him, people were saying, oh, he's kind of like a Tom Wilson type. A friend of mine was an agent. He was excited. And I was excited. Canadiens had size, because most of the Canadiens' best players don't qualify to ride a roller coaster because they're too small. So we got Josh Anderson. Like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And then first season, I thought he was good, and he was amazing in Columbus in the playoffs. And then you saw, I don't know if it's a regression or just he began to play in a manner which defined really who he was as a player. So I understood the contract at the time, to be honest. But Grant, for me, it was a classic, and I didn't love his processing on the ice as well. I don't want to be mean. I'm just giving you observations. He's very good looking, has tremendous hair, so he's better than both of us combined. But to me, that was an example of conflating or confusing size with athleticism and size with value. There's an obsession in the league when it comes to size. Big is better, and it's not. Marty Saint-Louis willed his way to success. He willed his way to the Hall of Fame. He's a small guy. Caulfield's a small guy. Look, you need size, particularly back on D if you're going to have any chance to win the playoffs. But sometimes I feel as though we overvalue size. So for me, a fourth line player, and Josh Anderson is a fourth line player this year, making $5.5 million. Those guys, you pay the league minimum or a little bit higher than that, maybe 1.5, 2 at the most. That's number 5 on my list. Who's number 4 on your list? Unless you want to comment on Josh in 30 seconds.
I do, if that's okay.
I hope I made you angry. Okay, here we go.
No, because he was an honorable mention, and in fact, if I hadn't thrown in Bunny Larocque there, he was the guy that would have been 5 on my list. I mean, I looked at the. You're right. Like his vision is limited. He's not a playmaker in any regard. He's not a goal scorer. Like, really, he had that 127 goals season, but we've seen him grip the stick a little too tightly way too often in the last few years. 135 points, right? That he's had with the Canadiens works out to $203,000 for every point scored. That's just not good enough. I'm sorry. Yes, he brings the size. Yes, he brings the character. Yes, there's a lot of female Habs fans that love him for reasons that you
and some male
maybe pointed out.
He's got the best hair in the league. Please, he's very handsome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but that's not. I've never judged a player on how handsome he was and on his worth. But that's all I use. Here's the thing. I don't be mean, Grant, but I've seen kidney stones that pass better than Josh Anderson. It's not offering a lot for that value, that AAV. All right, who's number 4 on your list? All right. Well, number 4 is my whipping boy from the mid 2010s, and that would have been David Desharnais. And I will, yes.
Little David, okay.
Little DD. He signed a 5-year deal in 2013-14 for $17.5 million. Average of $3.5 million per season. Okay, if you went strictly by points and salary, doesn't seem like it's a terrible. Like, he scored 100 points over the next 2 seasons, so okay, you could say he earned his salary those 2 years. But in his case, you got to look beyond the point totals, because his coach Michel Therrien was obsessed with him. He used him in a first-line center role when they didn't have any other options. But what needed to be done was trade him and find a better option, because they were not ever going to win a cup with a 5'6" center who is the worst. I've never seen one basket hang more than David Desharnais did after he scored a cup. He scored 60 points one year. I liked him when he first came up. He worked hard. He worked hard away from the puck. Once he got that contract, he was he was always the last player back. And as you know, well, Eric, you can't have the centerman be the last
No.
forward back in the zone. He hung out by the blue line. He like I put it together tapes where he'd be standing behind the red line, the goal line, and wait there after the puck's even outside the blue line. Still kind of just loaf back. It
That's
drove me
insane.
crazy.
That's
And
insane at the NHL level
it
to have a
is.
centerman who's not getting dirty in his own zone. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely. But
That's
just
insane.
never back, like the worst back checking center I've ever. And I watch you play away from the puck. Is just my scouting background. And but he had some chemistry, they thought, with Pacioretty. So Therrien played him 20 plus minutes a game. Never was more than a 15 goal scorer. Therrien used him on the first power play as a screener. And it just boggled my mind. Here's a 5'6" centerman who was trying to screen Ben Bishop, who was 6'7". He'd have him out on the power play in front. Best playmaker, or one of their best playmakers, and he had him screening the goalie on the power play. And what was he screening, his chest? It just made no sense whatsoever. Therrien loved him.
He was
And
obsessed. He was obsessed with him. He was obsessed.
Bergevin, hey, there was a meme on Hockey Futures. It's the funniest meme I've ever seen, and I used to rail on him, his defensive play and his obsession, Therrien's obsession. But there was this meme of David Desharnais at his locker, and the picture would get bigger and bigger, and it came up and it showed a picture of Therrien in a Speedo on the beach, pretending that Desharnais had a picture of in his locker of Therrien in a Speedo. And it just it cracked me up because it just seemed so appropriate. But signing him to a 5-year deal at that time to be the first line center just cemented the fact that they were never going to win a cup, I thought, because he never should have been a first line center in the league. By the third year, he couldn't score at all on top of the defensive play, and they finally just gave him away to Edmonton, thankfully, at that point.
That is the voice of Grant McCagg. I'm Eric Macramalla. For those that are listening, this is HabsCast, brand new Montreal Canadiens podcast that is the brainchild of Grant McCagg, rotating roster of hosts for the show. So if you love the Habs, well, you'll love this one. So now we are doing, just to recap, we're doing our top 5 worst contracts in Montreal Canadiens history. So you just gave me your number 4. I will give you, and that was David Desharnais, my number 4. You may not like, but that's okay. He's got 239 career goals. He is someone that tries harder than anybody else in the world. He's the NHL's version of Rudy. It's Brendan Gallagher, 6 years, 39 million, AAV of 6.5 million. So I love Brendan Gallagher. Okay. If he said, Eric, may I have one of your kidneys? I'm like, yes, you choose. Which one do you want, left or right? I tell my kids, I go, look at Brendan Gallagher. This is how we operate in life. He loves his mother, and he tries harder than anybody else. To me, he's an absolute true inspiration. The reason he's on my list is your question was not worst players, it was worst contracts. An AAV of 6.5 million. Was it a 6-year deal? For a player who now is effectively a third, fourth line player. I mean, he had a great season last year, scored 20 goals, which was fantastic. You can have him on the third line. But someone who didn't produce for a long time. Remember when I was hosting the afternoon show with Sean Campbell, or the mid-afternoon, or the mid-morning show, and it was the head of the 2022 season, and he asked me, how many goals will Gallagher get this year? And I said, he's going to get 8 goals in 35 games because he's not healthy anymore. It's not possible. I was wrong. It wasn't 8 games in 35 or 8 goals, 35 games. It was 8 goals in 37 games. Okay. It's not that I can see the future. It was just that he had not been healthy for so long. And there was a point 2 seasons ago where he came back into the Canadian zone and grabbed the puck. And he took a really, really wide turn. Something you do, I think, when you're playing hurt. And he blew a tire and he fell down. He kind of spun out. No one talked about it, but to me, it was like, okay, he's got serious physical issues. But last 2 years, 77 games, 82 games. I know I'm being positive here because I love the guy, but the AAV 6.5 million doesn't make sense. And on top of that, it really ties the hands of the Montreal Canadiens. Together with my number 5, Josh Anderson, it's $12 million dedicated to the fourth line for the Montreal Canadiens. Add in Jake Evans at 2.8, you're almost at $15 million for your fourth line. You cannot compete in the NHL and enjoy sustained success long-term if your fourth line is making combined $15 million. And if your two wingers, not a centerman, Grant, but your two wingers are coming in at $12 million a year. The calculus simply doesn't work. So I love Gallagher. I love everything about him. My only knock is the contract, 6.5 over 6 years. He's had a lot of difficulty. I wish him the best. Hopefully he's really good again this season, but that's a lot of money. In 30 seconds, give me your views because I know you got some views.
Yeah, it'll be more than 30 seconds if that's
okay. Here we go.
Well, I knew that you'd have him on a list, and again, I made him an honorable mention because I knew that you'd have him, and I wanted a different list. But definitely, him and Anderson are right in the running for, instead of Bunny Larocque, probably when you look at everything, $235,000 per point is what he's made so far on his contract. So, you can easily make the argument that he isn't earning it points.
And I guess I would say, Grant, not to cut you off, but with Buddy, back then there was no salary cap. So you could spend as much as you wanted. Owners maybe were cheap, but now there's a salary cap. So finite dollars. So it's bad contracts are all the more impactful, aren't they?
Yes, but I do think that like that salary, their salaries became known at the time because it's public. We just saw it. And I think it hurt when other players saw what Bunny was making and then they wanted more and things started to fall apart after that, right? But yeah, no, it's hard to argue when you say $243,000 per point since his contract was up. But he was a key part of the team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals. So that year, I would say, if you look at it from the standpoint of the owner, the guy that pays the salaries, how much money Molson could have made in the playoffs if it hadn't been a pandemic. I guess he didn't make as much. We can't make the argument that gate receipts because they can only have a few fans there, but certainly from a standpoint of his value that year, I think he earned his salary. And this past year, he made 8% of Montreal's. He ate up 8% of Montreal's salary cap, and he scored 11% of their goals. When you add in the fact of his leadership, his two-way play, heart and soul player, I think he earned his salary this past year. And I also, at the time when you used to,
but Greg, I just say this about the heart and soul thing because I agree. Look, I just told you how much I love him. But since he's been with the Canadiens, they haven't won a cup, right? They came close once. So he's a heart and soul guy, and those guys are important on hockey teams and on the dress, extremely important, absolutely. But they don't necessarily translate to significant success. They will translate to success, not significant. I mean, it's been on the team a long time, and they've been to the dance once.
But it's also, I think, the future, like the mentorship that even after he's gone and retired, I think his impact will still be felt with this young core that is going to be the core that if they do win a cup it's going to be this young group that they spent 3 or 4 years playing with a guy who just would die for his team. And I think it is rubbing off on these players, and that there will be impact on Brendan Gallagher after he's even retired on this group. And that goes beyond his salary. And I also think there's this misconception that 5'9" players are get worn out and that they can't And that was one of the arguments made. And I know we had a conversation on Twitter at the time because you would mention it quite often on your great radio show. And I finally weighed in on it at the time, thinking, well, I disagree. I think he will make his salary. As it's turned out, you were more right than I was at the time. But one of the arguments I made was like, and I've looked at all time leaders, like players that have played 1,200 or more games in the NHL. It's loaded with smaller players like Recchi, Dion, Housley, Verbeek, Ferrero, Henri Richard, Joe Pavelski, Ray Whitney, Patrick Kane, Dave Keon. They were all smaller players. So I don't agree with this. Well, if you're short, you can't have a long career in the
Oh, and
NHL.
I agree with you. And we talked about at the top of this show that one of my big complaints in sports, hockey or sports generally, is that we confuse and conflate size for athleticism and value. The thing with Brendan Gallagher, it's not that the issue wasn't that he was small. It was his size together with his style of play. He would station himself under the net and get beaten to a pulp. There comes a
Right.
point in time after 5 or 10, 7 or 8, whatever, 10s in the NHL, your body's going to say enough. And so we saw that 3 years ago. He just physically fell apart. I think if you're small, you can have success in the NHL, particularly if you're a forward. Defenseman is tougher. Just ask, guys like Victor Mete and, other guys that are small. But with Brendan Gallagher, I think the issue was his style of play. If he's not being punished, he's not being effective. So when he's being punished, he's getting hurt.
Well, Pat Verbeek played the exact same style, and Pat Verbeek played 1,300 games in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was more his finger injuries really weren't worn down. It was bad luck that he kept getting hit in the hand, and that was where he missed the majority of his games.
Right, he got hit in the hand where? Like in front of the net. Right, style of play
Well, by a
invited that.
puck, I think.
Pat Verbeek for me was a bit of an outlier. This guy was just
absolutely, but I think
he was like
Brendan
Wolverine.
Gallagher is too.
I just thought Verbeek. I was younger at the time, but it always seemed like if he had something, he would recover quicker. Or he was just more durable.
That could be, but certainly, Brendan Gallagher surprised me last season that he had the year that he had, and I would not be surprised if he has 2 more good seasons here at the end of his contract. I hope so. The argument that yes, he's a 4th liner on paper, yes, because people always look at points, but I would be shocked if the 4th line, which we expect to be Evans, Gallagher, and Anderson, plays fewer minutes than the 3rd and 2nd lines, because they're going to be matched up against teams' top 2 lines as a shutdown defensive, and they're going to play PK minutes. Somebody's got to make up for Armia and Dvorak on the PK, and I think Anderson and Gallagher will play lots of PK minutes, and that they're going to average 15 plus minutes a game. You can call it 4th line, but at the end of the day, they're still going to play more than several players that are on the 2nd and 3rd lines.
I would say I would say that when I look at the Canadiens team, and perhaps it's an indictment of the Canadiens' depth, especially down the middle, but I look at Anderson and Gallagher and Evans, the way they played last season, particularly Evans or Anderson and Gallagher, because Evans has always been consistent. They were very good last season at doing what they were told to do. They can easily bring 2nd line value insofar as helping the team win, right? I mean, because that's how good they were last year, but you also have issues. I mean, Newhook is not a 2nd or 3rd line centerman. To me, he's a 4th liner. Kirby Dach, I don't know what is going on there. I wish him the best. But then you look at our wingers, Kapanen and Laine, there are issues there, right? So Anderson and Gallagher very suddenly become more reliable than the majority of the Montreal Canadiens forwards. So I don't know what that says about the team. All right, let's go. Are you listening to HabsCast? That's Grant McCagg. I'm Eric Macramalla. So Grant, let's go on to number 3 on your list of the worst contracts in Montreal Canadiens history. I suspect you're going to have the same one, but you go ahead.
Well, Mike Hoffman.
Actually, no.
He signed a 3-year deal for $13.5 million after Montreal's playoff run in 2020 21. Considering that he'd had 6 20-goal seasons and then 17 and 52 at the Blues, the salary wasn't terrible when you weigh goals against salary. I get that, but it shocked me that, you know, he just wasn't a Bergevin type player. And I know, talking to Trevor Timmons in years past, there were rumors for 2 years that fans would be saying, "Oh, sign Mike Hoffman," and no, don't. And Trevor was on board and felt the same way, and I thought Bergevin did too. It just, his shortcomings just were, they were so obvious. His reputation, and us living in Ottawa, I think you were probably well aware of his reputation as well
I
at the
knew I
time.
knew his agent. Yeah,
Yeah, well, he
who
was
was
just
pleased
a
with the
one-way
deal.
player. He was
Yeah,
terrible defensively, and Bergevin found himself in need of offense. Tatar signed elsewhere, lost Corey
yeah.
Perry, this and that, and he panicked, I thought, and signed a player that he would normally have never signed, given his mantra of supposedly only obtaining character players. And then the Canadiens went on and had one of their worst seasons ever that year. And I truly do believe that it was in part due
Hmm.
to having Mike Hoffman on the roster and playing him in a top 6 role a lot of the season. He was he was very poor away from the puck. I don't think he was good in the dressing room, and it hurt chemistry. And they went from being a team that was so tight knit to being one that was fractured. And uh, you know what happened? He ends up getting traded for nothing the next year, and they retooled. But at the time, I hated the signing, and his play with the Canadiens never changed my mind.
Yeah, I remember when he was signed, and it seemed as though it was a desperate move. And I remember saying on the air that in any business, I don't care what line of work you're in, when you act out of desperation, you never make a good decision. And this was a player that was clearly a one-way player. There was no defensive value in his game, and that kind of stuff really annoys teammates, right? It was a 3-year deal, AAV of 4.5. He scored 15 goals and 14 goals in back-to-back seasons. They got rid of him. The reason I don't have him on my list, I thought about him, is only because it was a 3-year deal, gone after 2. It didn't really, given the state of the Montreal Canadiens, it didn't really handcuff them in any way. It was just a really bad decision. And he scored some goals on the power play, and the Canadiens couldn't score goals on the power play. So I guess using your language, it was an honorable mention for me.
Okay.
For me, number 3 on my list is Sergei Samsonov, 2-year deal, $7.05 million back in 2006. In the sole year with the Montreal Canadiens, 63 games, he scored 9 goals. Season before with the Oilers, before when he was traded there, 5 goals in 19 games with the Bruins, 18 goals in 55. So his production significantly declined. Anyone who watched those games just saw a player that could not produce with the Montreal Canadiens. And he was a bit better. He went to Carolina, but not much better. But the fit in Montreal just didn't work. And it was a player that didn't bring value associated with this contract. So for me, that was an easy one, is Samsonov at number 3.
Yeah, and I'm up to number 2 here now,
Yeah.
and I have the same guy, Sergei Samsonov. So
Okay.
we're
So
on
tell
the
me why you have him from a
yeah.
scout's perspective, from a cranky scout. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was eating up 8% of Montreal's salary, and he scored 9 goals. Right, so just that alone, but also he was clearly on the decline, as you mentioned. He wasn't a two-way player. He was undersized, didn't play. If he'd have played well away from the puck, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't horrible away from the puck. He worked, he competed, but he was clearly on the decline. Didn't put up the stats. Was just ended up being a poor decision. Like, Gallagher ate up 7% of the salary last year, had 36 points. Samsonov, 8%, 26 points. Just when you look at the sheer numbers, Gallagher had a better season last year, was worth more just from point production alone compared to Samsonov when he's with the Canadiens. And we know that Brendan Gallagher brings other things that Samsonov didn't necessarily bring. So
The
he
one
had
thing
to
I'll
be
say though, Grant, about Samsonov, he only played
63 games.
63 games. Thank you, in Montreal. And while he
Yeah,
didn't
true.
produce, he did try hard.
He did.
And he had a high level of compete.
Yep.
And I remember a lot of times he'd work hard in the corner trying to dig the puck out. I thought he was still a fun player to watch. He wasn't someone that I thought was a bad signing at the time, because I hadn't been following him close enough. Obviously, he was out of market, but I still respected the way that he played.
No,
Mike Hoffman,
right.
I didn't feel the same way. I'm like, you're not a complete hockey player, and it seems like you made a choice not to be a complete hockey player. Or for Mike Hoffman, it could be processing. I don't know what it is. I mean, and I know that.
No, for sure.
IQ is something. It is.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. So Samsonov 2. So let's go to number 2 on our list, the 5 worst contracts in NHL history, Montreal Canadiens history. So I'm going to come at you with my number 2, if that's okay. And by the way, you're listening to HabsCast. He's Grant McCagg. I'm Eric Macramalla. So my number 2 is not a player the Montreal Canadiens signed, but someone they traded for. Oh. I began to refer to him as a neutral zone specialist because he'd take the puck up, and between the red lines or blue lines, he was great. Then once he crossed the blue line, it would all just fall apart like a house of cards. You just blow ever so gently, and the house of cards would fall apart. It was Scott Gomez making $7.37 million. He was someone who didn't score a goal for a long time. Looking at his goal production last season with the Canadiens, 38 games, 2 goals. Season before that, 7 goals in 80 games. When the Canadiens acquired him, we all shook our heads. What on earth were you thinking trading away McDonough, right? It was Ryan McDonough out of Michigan. We were like 12th overall pick in the first round. McDonough's going to be an absolute stud, and everybody knew this. And there are instances in sports as a fan, Grant, where you look at a trade and you go, it's terrible, and everybody's right. And that was one of those instances. Now, look, I love Scott Gomez as a skater, beautiful skater, not remotely productive. He was, do you agree, neutral zone specialist. He was so good in the neutral zone, right?
You thought something great was happening.
I mean, he got him and Alex Newhook should have dinner together and talk about the good old days. Anyway, so Scott Gomez, don't get me started on Alex Newhook because you just did. I did. I started myself. So Scott Gomez's contract acquired from the Rangers for McDonough. McDonough, apparently Gauthier had just seen McDonough play once in Michigan and said, we can trade him away. One of the worst trades in Canadiens history. Not only that, a trade that altered the destiny and the path of this team for a decade or more, or maybe 25 years. Because with McDonough in the fold, it changes everything about this team. So for many reasons, I'm getting angry now. I'm the cranky one. Scott Gomez is number 3 on my list of worst contracts in Habs history. Who's number 2? Who's number 2 on your list?
Well, Samsonov was number 2.
Right.
Right. I want to add a little bit to that, Eric. I was scouting with the Canadiens at the time when the deal was made. Okay. And Trevor...
This is going to be good.
Trevor Timmins drafted him, right? And Trevor and I were in touch all the time and good friends. And, he was devastated by that trade. Like McDonough, he said he's an absolute stud horse. Like they did it. He didn't sign off on that one, but not that he had any say in it. But
why didn't he have say? I mean, he's the lead scout.
Well, he probably did, but I mean, he wasn't. Your pro scouts and GM make those decisions more. So it's not like he was scouting him after he picked him necessarily, right?
But was that all Pierre Gauthier telling Gainey to trade him? Was that?
I think so. But McDonough played at Wisconsin, by the way, not Michigan.
Oh, Wisconsin. But, sorry. Thank you.
You just knew, like you said, that he was going to be a fantastic defenseman. They needed a center. They needed a top 2 center. And there's an example of why you don't panic to get a top 2 center if that's the deal that you make. Because Gomez's salary, if I recall correctly, was like maybe top 10.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah. Like,
top 10
it's
in
the
the
kind of
league.
contract with this production last year with the Rangers, 16 goals, 58 points, 77 games, is teams pay you to take that salary. You
Yeah,
don't give him your top prospect in the system.
right, right. And he had one 20-goal season up until that point in his career. Like, he was a playmaker more than, but yeah, he'd come through this neutral zone just to fly in, and you think, oh, he looks good. And got into the offensive zone, and oh, what's he going to
What
do
happened?
here? So yeah, I only I mean, he'd have been in my top two if I'd have taken guys that I only did a top five of guys that signed contracts with Montreal, but absolutely, if you just go by worst contracts that the Canadiens have had, he, him and Rene Bork both would be in the running for sure.
Oh, Rene Bourque, yeah. I enjoyed him, but like, I even wrestled about Gomez being my worst, only because, not because he's worse than my number one pick. I assume we have the same one, but it was because it altered the path of the Canadiens up until this point. This would be a
Yes,
very different franchise.
no, absolutely, and the pick, just like when they got Tournier too, from Colorado, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Gave up first round pick, and Trevor was they were going to pick John Carlson. So if they hadn't, just stay put and not make those two deals, they've got McDonough, Subban, Markov, and Carlson as their top four
Oh
for
my
a decade.
goodness, you're making me angry again. I wasn't aware of the Carlson. Is
Oh
this
yeah.
common knowledge? I haven't heard of that.
Well, no, like Trevor, like that was the guy that they had targeted with their first
Grant, I think
round
what
pick.
you want to say to that question is no. It's the only exclusive content you can get on HabsCast with Grant
That's right.
McCagg. That's right.
Well, I'm
It
glad
really
you
is
said it.
amazing, though, isn't it? How just what looks to be a small decision at the time, even though clearly wrong, just alters the course for a franchise and a business
Yeah.
for 30 years.
Yeah, for sure. But that top four would have been the best in the league. And you build from the net out, Price
Yep.
and Nets, and those four, your top four, they'd have contended for a number of years, as long as they had, got some forwards to supplement them. But hey, it's life.
It is. Okay, so let's go to our worst contract in Montreal Canadiens history. I will cede the floor to you, Grant McCagg of HabsCast. Who is your worst contract in Montreal Canadiens history?
Worst contract in Montreal Canadiens history is it's Carl Alsner. And I'm pretty sure that you have the same one. Signed
Actually,
that.
I wanted to do this first show in the helicopter they used to show Montreal to get him to sign, but I couldn't find the helicopter. They took him on a helicopter tour. I don't know if you know this. They took him on a helicopter tour of Montreal to entice him to sign with the Canadiens. That's how much they wanted him. They hadn't seen him skate, but that's how much they wanted him. So why is, as I called him on the air at the time, Ed Asner? It wasn't very nice, and I feel bad. But why is Carl Alsner? Why is he your worst contract?
I interviewed him in his draft year and asked him what his favorite activity was off the ice, and he said shopping. And I've never come across another another NHL
shopping
player that had that answer. And
what?
Always
shopping. You just blew my mind.
Yeah, and
shopping. Okay.
I wish the Canadiens
shopping for skating lessons.
I wish the Canadiens wouldn't have gone shopping that off season. I'll tell you that much. But I think the offshoot of it too was that Bergevin made the decision, I suppose, not to renew a contract with Markov, in part because he thought, oh, we can replace him with top five pick from the NHL draft, Carl Alsner. And they clearly did not watch him in the playoffs that previous year, because by the end of it, he was a fifth or sixth D-man on Washington's pecking order. And it was clear that he had lost a step. And I think that trade or that signing was made without proper pro scouting being done as it showed. I mean, 1 year with the Canadiens, struggled mightily, And 2 years making $5 million plus a year in the minors. It's the one and only time the Canadiens. I think Alsner took pity on the organization, and he was a nice guy, nice guy, and I'll give him all
Oh,
that.
of
Great
course.
guy, but took a pity and said, "Okay, I'll retire." Instead of you having to pay $5 million a year for me to keep playing in the minors. But it hands down the worst contract in Montreal Canadiens history, and there certainly is a preponderance of Bergevin signings in the top 10 all time.
So, did he retire 2 years before his contract was done? Did he give up the last 2
I
years?
believe so.
Okay,
Yes.
that was another stupid decision that he made. Because if he'd gone shopping for agents, good agents, they would have told him, no, you do what Carey Price did. Because the Carey Price contract, 10.5 AAV going back to 2017 or 18, whenever it was. That's one of the worst contracts Canadiens have signed. Again, because it's the AAV. It took until last season for Shesterkin to pass him. 7 years after he signed his deal, right? Or 8 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But with Carl Alsner, really nice guy, but someone who clearly could no longer keep up. And in a league that was getting faster, he was getting exposed every single night for his edge work and for, his coup de patin, so to speak. He simply wasn't quick enough. So it's interesting that Bergevin, I was told by Brian Burke, I've spoken at his conference for a few years, and we sit down, and I remember the very first year I spoke at his conference, it was sports legal stuff, right? Go through all this stuff. He was in the first row looking at me, and he heckled me. I was talking about the NFL concussion litigation, the first lawsuit filed in the state of Pennsylvania, and going through the stuff, and just objectively, like I always do, say, here are the arguments, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't like that and was heckling me and gave me the evil eye. Fast forward 3 years, he pulls me aside after. He goes, "You're the best speaker at this conference." I said, "Oh, okay, thanks, Brett. You want to join me for lunch?" I'm like, "Sure, join him for lunch." So we sit down. And he's told me about Marc Bergevin. His reputation around the league was he had a really good eye for talent.
He did.
But his issue was being an architect. But what I'm seeing is he had a great eye for talent, like with, guys that he picked up, like Petrie and Deneau, guys like that, right? Effectively free. But he was a poor architect, but also didn't do his due diligence. Just didn't understand what you needed to do to build a good team. It's not making these quick decisions, and Alsner was one of them. But it's interesting that Bergevin saddled this team with a lot of bad contracts. I would say disproportionately, I don't see if you agree with this, that Marc Bergevin saddled the Montreal Canadiens over his tenure and after with a disproportionately high number of bad contracts. We talk Gallagher, we talk Anderson, we talk Alsner. The list seems to go on. I'm curious what your view on that is.
No, he did. I thought as far as trades go, Bergevin had a fantastic record. He won most of his trades, and drafting got better after he stopped trading away high picks and accumulating some. The drafting got better and better, and by the time he had left, the Canadiens were drafting quite well, I thought. But it was all about, well, not just player contracts, but coaching contracts. He signed Therrien to a long-term deal, which I would have never done. Brought him back again for the second go around. Same deal with Julian. Brought him back didn't work the first time. Don't know why I thought it was going to work the second time, and then gave them big contracts, which kind of handcuffed the Canadiens. It was tough to get rid of them because they were on such long deals and had a lot of money. So not just player contracts, but coaching contracts, and wrong coaches, in my opinion, were the downfall of Bergevin.
Yeah, and some of those contracts are still on the payroll. Just got rid of them. So look at his worst signings: Carl Alsner, Brendan Gallagher, Josh Anderson, Yoel Armia, Mike Hoffman, Carey Price. Carey Price is now off the books. You still have Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher, two players that are playing well, but are not worth their AAV. And it really is interesting how on the one end, he trades so well. I mean, you look at the and drafted well. I mean, look at the Montreal Canadiens lineup today: Suzuki, Caulfield, Jake Evans, right? Gooley, big part of the Canadiens. These are guys that were acquired or drafted by the Bergevin regime, and those are some. You could argue a lot of those players are heart and soul players for this team and a big part of their future. But it's just interesting that those UFA signings were not aligned with what I thought otherwise was a pretty decent profile for a general manager insofar as success goes.
Yeah. He needed a capologist a decade ago, like a serious one that he listened to as well. I think that was something that, because he wouldn't have signed some of those deals that he did. I don't think if there'd have been somebody in his ear talking about, look, that's going to eat up too much of our cap space, and you have to play hardball a little bit. I think he signed a lot of contracts with his heart more than his head. And it ended up.
He cried at the Brendan Gallagher press conference, remember, announcing his deal. He cried.
Yeah,
that was a red flag. That was a red flag. Well, look, we are up almost at the hour, so I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, or if you want to wrap this puppy up.
I guess it's going to be the contract. Our debut will be. I thought it'd be fitting, given your background and all of the great shows I've listened to from you in the past, where you discuss contracts and better than anybody else on radio, I might add. So I'm glad that our first debut episode was contract centric.
And next one, we definitely were going to talk Habs lines and what the future holds. But I'll say this: I'll talk Habs with someone I met at the grocery store that doesn't want to talk Habs. To be able to talk the Montreal Canadiens with you, Grant, is a real pleasure and a real delight. We sat down together for a beer a month or two ago, and I was left with the impression that you're a gentleman. You can't get that over social media, right? I just know you're highly knowledgeable on social media, but it's a great combination. And from my standpoint, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I really enjoy talking to you, and I love to hear what you have to say.
The same goes for me, Eric. I was very impressed in our meeting, and I first impressions are important, and I was more than comfortable and surprised that you said, hey, yeah, sure, I'd love to host a show. I wasn't expecting it, and I'm just thrilled that you've come on board, and this was great, and I really look forward to the future weekly podcast with you.
Oh, I can't wait for next week already. I can't wait to talk about the Habs and all the ways they've already disappointed me. But on the flip side, how I really respect the Montreal Canadiens management regime. He's Grant McCagg. I'm Eric Macramalla. This has been HabsCast, a brand new podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, deep dives into your favorite team. Thanks so much for listening, and we will chat soon.